Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us. I see our group populating here. Aaron, how about you give our folks the trivia question before we get started?
Yeah, we'll get started in just a minute here, folks. Our trivia question is, what kind of animal was Dewey Readmore Books, who lived in the Spencer, Iowa library, in whose book bin he'd once been abandoned until his death in 2006? What kind of animal was that? So go ahead and put your answer in the chat, and maybe include where you're watching from.
Yes,
We'll
everybody
get
make your
started in just
guess.
a moment.
Okay, everybody, I am recording and we are also streaming on IFU's Facebook page. You can find that recording there right now, and when we're finished, later it will be on IFU's YouTube page if you want to watch it there. Aaron, I think I'm all set if you want to move us into things.
Well, very good. Well, welcome everyone. This is the Iowa Farmers Union Lunch and Learn series. My name is Aaron Lehman, and I serve as president of the Iowa Farmers Union. I farm here in central Iowa. And we are very honored to have as our guest today Chris Clayton, journalist at DTN Progressive Farmer. Welcome, Chris. It's good to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Aaron. I'm at the DTN headquarters, world headquarters, in Omaha. So,
Well, very good. Well, very good. Well, we're going to give just a couple of announcements before we start our important conversation today. So people who are just joining us, take a shot at the trivia question. What kind of animal was Dewey Readmore Books, who lived in the Spencer, Iowa library, in whose book bin he'd been once been abandoned? What kind of animal was that? But before we get any further, we want to give a couple of announcements for the Iowa Farmers Union. We have excellent lineup on tap for the Iowa Farmers Union State Convention. It is taking place December 5th and 6th in Ames, Iowa. Of course, this is where we set the policy for the Iowa Farmers Union and we elect the leaders for the Iowa Farmers Union. In addition, we have a fantastic lineup of workshops and panels, and many opportunities to gather together. The Iowa Food System Coalition will have the Iowa Food Policy Summit taking place right before the convention begins on Friday. We are so grateful to be partnering with that at the same location. A candidate forum for Iowa candidates running for our federal offices, congressional and Senate offices, is going to take place on Friday afternoon. We anticipate that we will be awarding Senator Harkin, who received the National Farmers Union highest award, Meritorious Service Award, earlier this spring, and he's going to join us. And we'll be able to thank him in person for all his work that led to his award from the National Farmers Union. On Friday, we have an excellent set of workshops and panels, including a trade panel which will feature Dr. Chad Hart from Iowa State University. We'll also feature Jonathan Koppas, who is our keynote speaker. He'll be giving the keynote later in the day, but he'll be joining our trade panel. And we'll also be joined by Lori Wallach with Rethink Trade. So it's going to be an incredible panel talking about the trade tensions happening in agriculture now. And again, I mentioned our keynote address is Jonathan Koppas over the noon hour, and all sorts of fantastic workshops going on. Sign up today if you haven't had a chance to. And Chris, you're going to be taking part in one of our panels too on the state of rural journalism. And we want to get a highlight about that. One or two more announcements before I move into our conversation, though. We are hosting a couple of happy hours in two communities this coming week. Clarinda will be on Tuesday evening starting at 6 o'clock, and Fairfield on November 21st on Friday. So join us. We'll have a community happy hour next week on Tuesday, the 18th, and then in Clarinda, and then on Friday, the 21st, in Fairfield. So you do not need to be a member to come, but it's a chance for community members to get together and learn about the Farmers Union and learn from one another with some good drink and appetizers. So sign up for that today. But let's focus back on our convention. One of the wonderful workshops that's taking place at the Farmers Union Convention on Saturday Uh, our guest, Chris Clayton, will join Art Cullen from the Storm Lake Times, Cami Koons from the Iowa Capital Dispatch, and Doug Burns from the Iowa Capital Dispatch for a full workshop on the challenges and importance of local journalism and supporting informed communities. And we are very grateful that we are joined today by Chris Clayton, journalist at the DTN Progressive Farmer, and we'll talk about that vital role of rural journalism in telling the stories of farmers and rural communities. So thank you for being with us, Chris. It's great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here, Aaron. And
Well,
it should be a great panel.
Yeah, give us give us a little taste of what you've been thinking about going into that panel with that distinguished um, lineup of Iowa journalists.
I'm thinking, I don't, you got Art there. Art's a Pulitzer Prize winner. A Pulitzer Prize winner truly from a rural area in Iowa in a small town paper. Both he and Doug Burns have, made their careers out of, small town papers. I started out at small town papers and, was always wanting to be bigger fish in a bigger pond somewhere else. Looking forward to that. And Cami, that the role that those state newspapers have filled, or websites have filled across the country, Capital Dispatch, and others, in terms of covering state government, almost filling a vacuum that's kind of been lost a little bit by the daily newspapers. And it's interesting because I read those almost daily, what's going on in different states.
Yeah. So, you've covered the gambit of these things in your career, from local papers all the way up to regional, statewide type papers, and now your current role. So, what lessons carry over in that work?
Um, Being aggressive in realizing that it's still a competitive environment as a journalist to get out and get the news, and if you're really good at it, you don't want to be left behind. You don't want to find out after the fact. You definitely don't want to read or learn about something from somewhere else. And that is like a daily kind of commitment that you kind of have to really be good at the job. If you just kind of I'll let them deal with it, or it's not my area, then you're not covering it, and then somebody's maybe not going to see what's going on somewhere.
Well,
So
and that lessons, I mean, I'm sure you're putting that into place right now. There is so much happening so quickly in these last few weeks in the ag journalism space and in the national situation. Um, it's tough for our folks to keep track of. Sometimes there's so much breaking, but so we want to learn what your impressions are with the latest developments this week, with the agreement to end the shutdown and to include in that farm bill extension and some agricultural appropriations work. Was was this part of your as you were working on this story? Was this always part of the picture that you were seeing that was going to emerge?
not the farm bill extension right now, and the way the full funding thing came from for USDA, in the Senate bill, and in the Senate, it's sometimes it is extraordinarily hard, in the Senate to cover, a piece of legislation,
Hmm.
because they have ways of not putting it forward, at times until the very end, until the very moment they're ready to vote on it.
Hmm.
And that's kind of, that's how this appropriations bill came together on Monday, and the Senate's voting for it. You don't really see what's going on until, and then, you're trying to read and absorb through everything that's related to you. Well, then there was a lot obviously in this bill that was tied to agriculture and obviously the USDA programs, and just trying to yeah, absorb all of that. One of the interesting debates was, and maybe hasn't had enough reporting on, was about hemp.
Hmm.
And they changed the dynamics. When they passed the 2018 Farm Bill, they had this very specific thing in terms of THC content in hemp. Well, the way that they wrote it allowed, this kind of this broad group of CBD products. Many of them are very intoxicating, to be sold all over the country, and a lot of senators didn't like that. That was a bipartisan vote to reduce it. That was 76 votes, and even though you had a Republican and a Democrat both lobbying or pushing for the Senate to not do that. So you had bipartisan opposition. You had overwhelming, though, bipartisan support. That will change the landscape a little bit on what's now going to be legal under hemp. And then, it was it's been really excruciating and just extraordinarily disappointing to watch everything that happened over the last 3 or 4 weeks with SNAP.
Hmm.
Um, and I do take this a little bit personally, because I remember being on food stamps as a kid. I remember my mother giving me food stamps to walk down to the store in the small town that I lived in Missouri. We still had a little grocery store to buy things, and I knew they weren't dollars. I knew that they were something different, but I could buy milk and cereal and whatever else with that. And I know I think I was probably on reduced lunches probably my entire childhood.
Hmm.
So, these programs, there's a personal kind of element to that. And we had the World Food Prize just that last week of October. And Jose Andres, the chef, was talking about governments not weaponizing food,
Yeah.
and and within just basically a week of that, we're weaponizing a food program and using it as leverage, affecting 42 million people, something like 17, 18 million kids, 7 or 8 million people of them are senior citizens. Just the whole gamut of the people who are kind of at the lowest, really 10 to 15% of our population, are being held hostage, more or less, their food aid over this situation that for the first time, they've never gotten to the point where they said, we were not going to pay SNAP benefits until now.
Yeah.
And
Chris, I had a farmer tell me, he thought that we hit a low point um, when SNAP took the largest cut in
yeah,
food programs in history this summer. And then he said, well, we didn't hit a low point. We reached a new low point when we chose to weaponize the closing of SNAP benefits during the shutdown for the first time ever.
and it's, I've spent really 20 years now covering farm groups. Um, all of the National Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, corn growers, soybean growers, wheat growers, on and on and on. And, when they really want to press on something, they can put together a letter with 200 organizations on it, and they can get it out, when they want to press on something. And to me, that was another element of this that was so disappointing over the last 3 weeks or so, was that the farm groups say, no, this couldn't put out a letter, say, no, this is inexcusable, you know. this is something that, there used to be, we called, quote, the Farm Nutrition Coalition that put together a farm bill. They couldn't come together at this time and say, we're not going to let this happen before Thanksgiving. There's just a real difficulty about that the farm groups didn't step up at this moment when they have gotten so much aid and are expected to continue to get so much aid this year, last year. We're talking about, we're going to see a new aid program rolled out from USDA probably before the end of the year. But they couldn't come together to say, we're not going to let this happen to SNAP benefits. And if they had been a voice, it would have drawn a lot of attention.
Absolutely. And we had farmers in Washington D.C. in September, and we encouraged our delegation, our Iowa delegation, finds time to get together to co-sign a letter to try to attract USDA offices coming to Iowa that might be moving out of DC, on and on and on. But yet we couldn't see a joint letter helping our food insecure people here in Iowa from the largest cuts that they were facing. We really need to do a better job of pulling our community together. That has to include the nutrition piece in order for us to get the good farm policy, doesn't it?
Well, you used to think so, but a lot of that has been lost, obviously, with the cuts in the one big beautiful bill thing, and then obviously now where we're at with, and I'm assuming benefits are going to be going out in the next couple of days, but I haven't had that kind of pressure for a long time on food security personally, but so even myself, I think it's been a long time, but it's an incredibly uncomfortable feeling for people who are forced to rely on this or forced to maybe go to a food bank for the first time. Things that people are very uncomfortable having to do. And we've put them in this situation for really no fault of their own. So,
yeah. Well, and folks are also pointing out the dichotomy, not only with us working hard to try to help farmers are going through trade tensions through no fault of their own and trying to develop packages for that. So there is that dichotomy of where we need to help our entire community, not just one piece of it. But in addition to that, we live in such an abundant state here, and yet we know that our food insecurity issues are real, urban and in rural areas, even more so in our rural areas.
And there's no reason why anybody in the United States should have to go hungry. There just should not be a reason or excuse why that needs to happen. So that somebody on a level that the better angels of our policymakers did not really rise to the occasion, and there's maybe a little bit of both sidism there, but I think I can totally understand the 7 or 8 Democrats on the Senate who finally gave in. From their point of view, they were not making headway on the Affordable Care Act stuff, and it just didn't look. But now you've got a segment of your population that's also now under pressure because of this. So I get why that kind of ended the way it did, So.
Yeah, lots of pressures from every side for a lot of our rural folks these days, from the healthcare side to the food insecurity side to everything. So, you talked about the Farm Bill Coalition that's needed to politically get good farm policy passed. As a reporter, what are you going to be looking for to see signs of how that is going to be rebuilt, and what signs are there going to be that you're looking for to say that we can get the Farm Bill coalition back a good Farm and Food Policy Coalition back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we were supposed to have passed a farm bill in 23. 23 was kind of the year. And I tragically joked before that time that I said, no, it won't be till 25. It won't be till after the election. And I firmly believe they weren't going to give Biden and the Democratic president a farm bill with a Republican Congress. And that ended up being the case. But now we're going through 26, and there have been just looking at one thing that I've kind of focused on with a few different articles in the past several months is looking at farm loans.
Hmm.
There were really good bipartisan proposals, almost identical in the House and Senate Ag Committee. Klobuchar and I can't remember the Republican, they've put forward a bill. Hoeven, I think it was might have been Senator Hoeven. They had a bill to beef up farm loans in the Senate that almost identically matched another bill in the House. And we've had hearings, congressional hearings in both the House and Senate over the past year about credit and what can be done for FSA loans to increase operating loan levels, the home ownership, make it easier for somebody to be qualified as a beginning farmer to get an FSA loan. And there was even talk about trying to figure out ways to speed up the process and everything like that. Well, we had a shutdown, which basically can you imagine having to try to wait for an FSA loan, or even a home ownership loan at USDA, and maybe you're supposed to close on November 1st, and the entire month of October, the anxiety that you were dealing with, try to close out a loan. Well, I mean, you have these proposals out there to really improve FSA loan programs, and they're not going anywhere because we're waiting to get a farm bill done. That's a big piece that directly affects small and younger farmers, is the ability to access FSA loans, and get a quick loan. I mean, you guys know better than I do. You're not going to get an FSA loan if you're trying to get a piece of property at an auction
That's right.
because you can't get pre-approval.
That's right.
All of these things have been laid out in bills, and nothing has happened for 3 years, even though they match. The bills match,
Yeah.
their provisions, and you can't get anything done until you get authorizing legislation in a farm bill to say we're going to improve this FSA loan stuff for you guys. And
Right.
you're just kind of stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. So a good example of what it's going to take in order to get that move forward. Well, so we've had a great conversation about a lot of different pieces. I kind of want to tie it back to what our conversation that's going to take place at the convention, and how this all impacts rural journalism. Rural journalism has changed tremendously over the past 4 decades. Give us a hint of where you think things are moving forward, or what positive things you think are moving forward in rural journalism.
I've noticed, the TV stations in the Omaha area. I can't really tell about the Des Moines market, but in the Omaha area, the TV stations have gotten much better at hiring reporters to cover the small towns.
Mm.
We have a reporter for one of the TV stations in Omaha, Channel 3, who grew up in the town that I live in, Glenwood. So we see more stories out of Southwest Iowa towns because that's where she grew up. And they have three different kind of reporters that are covering, the smaller towns more.
Mm.
So just the television, and I don't watch a lot of television news, but I just know, obviously, just even from videos on Facebook or whatever else, seeing more of that. And I think just social media obviously changes um, kind of dynamics because everybody's got their Facebook page for their town
Sure.
where, there's why are there sirens? What were the sirens about? Right? Everybody saw, oh, there was an accident on Highway 34 at such and such. Just all of that sort of stuff gets a little more focused on. But at the same time, I think maybe we're losing more of the covering of local governments
Mm.
the way that we used to, which is how I began was covering. My first job was covering county government meetings, county government in Missouri. So I would cover like two or three different county governments, and not many people are really covering local government at that level like they used to.
And there's so much important things happening there that,
I think Doug and but they'll be able to talk a little more about that because they're a lot more directly connected than I am.
yeah. Well, good. Well, we're really looking forward to the conversation. So, folks, if you haven't had a chance to sign up for the convention, and please go to that workshop, it's going to be a
And
super highlight.
I'm really hoping so. I should be okay, but I'm getting a having a knee surgery on Monday, and I'm
Mm.
told by 3 weeks I will be doing fine. So hopefully, if worst case scenario, my wife's gonna have to drive me over there or something, but we'll see. But we'll see how my recovery is after my knee surgery on Monday.
Well, we'll be thinking of you, and we'll hope that you come out even better through the whole process. In the meantime, we'll be paying attention to your work, your updates on what's going on with the federal issues in particular have been very important to our community and to our farmers to get solid information, even though we know it's a challenge in these days to get it. So we thank you very much for your leadership and your work in in agriculture journalism, and we thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Sarah, and I really appreciate it. You guys are the only guys I know of, by the way, that does a weekly ag group that does a weekly webinar thing. I don't get want information like that from anybody else. I think that's interesting, that you guys do that because it's obviously important and it's getting out to a lot of different people.
Yeah, it really is a valuable tool for us, and we have our whole Farmers Union team to thank for that, and especially Christina, who pulls us together every week. So thank you, Christina, and thank you to the Farmers Union team. For folks, this all comes together because our members come together to make it happen. So if you haven't had a chance to join the Farmers Union, please do so today. So thank you for your support of the Farmers Union. We know that by working together, we can bring these efforts to inform our members, inform the public about what's going on with family farmers in rural Iowa. So thank you for being with us. And Chris, again, thank you and good luck in these coming weeks. We'll look forward to hopefully seeing you in Ames in just a couple of weeks. And Christina, thanks again for pulling us all together.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.